go for it.
Have fun.
I will. I hope everyone else will too. Hi, everybody. I'm Michael. I teach with games and I make games that teach. I'm a teacher. I was in the classroom for over 20 years. And during the pandemic, I got the chance to move to working online using role-playing games and started designing games for the purpose of teaching kids how to write. And I got really nerdy about it and very obsessive. And this is sort of a part two. I gave a speech, last time on the last Barcamp, and it was about how I came to designing games specifically for the purpose of teaching, because there's a lot of folks who use games to teach, but there's a big difference between using a game and sort of having to adapt it and actually designing a game. And this time I thought, okay, I should probably talk about something slightly different in case I've got anybody who's joining me for a second time. And so I'm going to talk about translating what has become a very successful online small group writing workshop approach to a classroom approach, because I'm currently working with a couple of fifth grade teachers for people in different countries that's around 10, 11 years old in Maine on play testing an approach that will be kickstarted in March. So that's what I'm here to talk about. And again, if you're just joining us, please don't hesitate. If you have anything you'd like to ask, interrupt me. I'd love to talk to you. So this is where I like to start pretty much anything I begin with. If I'm talking about games, this is what I'm going to talk about. School is a game. There are arbitrary points. They're assigned. You're in a competition with other students, even if it's not directly stated, or we try to state contrary, right? We say, oh, it's not really about competition. You're only fighting with yourself. The kids are very aware of the arbitrary points. It's not a well-designed game, though, because it's not designed for students. It's designed for teachers. It's designed for administrators. It's designed to help track kids and sort kids and make it easy to grade. It is not necessarily designed for them to have fun or get passionate about learning or feel compelled to practice academic skills. So there's a couple points here. Grades are subjective. Every single classroom, the rules are different, right? Even if you state that they are normed, of course it changes from teacher to teacher, and kids know this, right? They'll say, oh, that teacher hates me, or I hate that teacher. They're very aware that the game isn't fair. The second is it's designed to make it easy for teachers. You have to, in many of the schools in the United States that I've taught at, there's a requirement to submit something like 2 grades per week. If you have to submit 2 graded assignments for 200 students a week, the chance that you're giving them some sort of formative and reflective feedback on academic practice and mastery is very low. It's more about tracking those students and proving that you are undergoing some sort of activity with them. The third, parents and teachers are usually the only audience. Grades are held as this sort of state secret. Very often when you write something, you submit it to the teacher, and then you don't see it again until you get it back with a bunch of red marks on it. And then very often students won't look at the marks. They'll look directly at the grade, and then they'll either think, oh, thank God I made it. I got a decent grade. I'm not going to pay any more attention to it, but I'm going to feel better. Or they'll think, okay, so I just got confirmation that either 1, I'm terrible at this, or 2, I'm stupid, because they will often internalize the idea that that bad grade doesn't reflect their learning or their skills or an ongoing process, but it rather comes as a judgment because there's been no celebration. There's been no reward. It's merely negative feedback. And that leads to the last point, which is A&F students know the same secret, which is that it is a game. They just have a very different response to the game. A students decide, okay, it's a game. I'm going to play to win. So they'll often walk into a room, and instead of asking things like, what can I learn here? Or what would be compelling? Or what could I master? Or what's exciting about this topic? They'll ask, how do I get an A? Because they need the points. They're playing to win. F students know that same secret. And in some ways, I often celebrate my F students, or at least the ones who come to me having had that experience before, for being a little braver. very often their response to the classroom game is, this game is arbitrary and played for dumb points and subjective, and the teachers changed the rules. So I'm not playing. I'm going to save my energy and time for something else that I care about, whether it's video games or sports or whatever it is. And that's, when you think about the setup, sort of a wonderfully logical approach, right? You can't blame them. So I have another talk in which I'd happily talk about the details, and I'll get into some of the details of the game here. I created Stories RPG in collaboration with a colleague, Daniel Hines. He runs Stories Podcast, which is the world's largest and longest running stories podcast for kids. We created Stories RPG. It's a modular system. You don't have to learn all the rules ahead of time. In fact, you can play to learn the rules. Every one of the game books we release is accompanied by a podcast where there's a group of players going through a parallel plot line that occasionally intersects with the play at home work. And we release these as the podcast comes out. So right now we've got Giga City Guardians up on Stories RPG, and there's a play at home game where you can play a pack of new superhumans sort of dealing with and learning how to use their powers while the characters from the series are charting a parallel course. I've been teaching with this system, teaching kids how to write for, almost 4 years now. And I've had hundreds and hundreds of students, and I've had a lot of academic wins with them that have honestly made me kind of facepalm. I don't know why I wasted so much time coming to story games as an educational tool. So here are some of those wins. Massive academic improvement. My kids have written thousands of pages. Most of my classes, even if they meet 5 times, they'll generate well over 100 pages of content between 5 students, most of whom have never written more than a page in their lives. It's practical writing for a purpose. The kids are writing for each other and to explore and build the world together, which leads to collaborative culture building. The game focuses on story, not on winning or combat. It's not about killing things. It's about, hey, what would be interesting here? So there's a lot of cultivation of, okay, maybe this is a good moment to fail. And kids will encourage each other like, oh, blow this roll. It'll be great for the story if we mess this up. Or if somebody messes up and everybody wants it to go well, they'll say, I got extra story points, do a re-roll. So there's a lot of genuine collaboration. I have a personal thing about group work. You can ask me about it if you wish, but most group work is not designed in a way that makes the group come together, but sort of fractures it. My goal here was to create something where kids really did learn to trust one another by relying on each other in the story. They end up with a portfolio, which is an accessible body of work that helps track their progress and all their work on a variety of different academic standards. And then accessing the idea of play space. Kids, sadly, they've got a lot more ways to play. And in some ways they have less space, less play spaces, fewer play spaces to play in. And school is very often structured as opposite to play or in opposition to a place where play doesn't happen. And that's a pity because, as we all know, like, play is where you learn, right? Any story game nerd can tell you they've had really compelling emotional experiences that change them in a game. So the classroom is a very different context from the one I've been teaching in, and working on how to shift what I do with a small group, 5 to 6 kids, 2 hours per class, 5 classes per session. How to shift that to a classroom approach has been something I've been working on for the last year. So these were some of the challenges that I was dealing with. Class size. So how do you group them? How do you make a live session work if you've got 20 kids or 30? Digital versus physical. Digital has some amazing advantages. Translating that to physical classrooms can be difficult, and technology access is no joke. There's the question of pacing and timing. I had 2-hour blocks, which I could split between lore sessions and live sessions with my kids. That's not possible in a lot of classrooms, right? So there's a moderation and a mediation that is required there. And then the last piece is this question of design balance. Too much versus not enough. Teachers are like kids. If there's too much on the page, we won't. It's too much. I got too much to do. Unless you're giving me something easy to run that I can use right now. No, thank you. I'm not going to do it. Because I'm focused on my kids and I have a million other things that I'm processing, right? Not enough. If you don't give them enough support and enough description of how story games work, especially for those teachers who are new to story gaming, they can't. There are some complex pieces in there. Oftentimes, story games are much harder for adults because, kids know how to tell stories. It's we who forget. And as moderators, we sometimes have to relearn. Yeah. So I mentioned this in my last presentation. Online, I have 10, 12 different settings, and we begin every session by letting kids pick so that they have a lot of agency and buy-in from the get-go. They decide on the world they want to go to. They decide on where they would like to explore. And as a result, they have a lot of commitment to the story because it belongs to them from the start. But for the purpose of a classroom game, this would be too much, right? I can't and it would be too much work for me to produce. So I needed to zero in on a single setting. Partly because one of my students' parents is an artist, and he said, I want to draw some sci-fi stuff. And also partly because my collaborators in the classroom, I have a science teacher and also an ELA teacher. I created Luna Uni. So this is a future in which it's a utopian future. There are these core worlds where people are sustainable and there's generally peace and nobody's hungry and people tend to get along. And as a result, people who are exceptionally brilliant or want to push limits don't fit and are considered misfits. So the students take on the role of students, but at a very particular university, an entire moon that's been terraformed into a playground for the ultra brilliant and risky. And so anybody who is creative and unique and pushes boundaries, they send them to Luna Uni. And this allows for a setting that is nonviolent, but still has a feeling of rebellion, individuality, and, a little bit of punk rock. Nobody wants to play, no kid wants to play somebody who's entirely boring. You want to push some limits. So the next step was considering how to run sessions. I run my online sessions in hour-long blocks. So usually our first hour, students read aloud the lore they've created, the stories that they've told. And we cheer and clap like crazy. And we also they get to assign themselves story points. Those story points end up allowing them to change their character by rerolls, by new abilities. They give them all of the agency they need in live sessions. This is also when we do our editing. In lore sessions, we're very often talking about, all right, where do we need to have, better margins? Hey, compound complex sentences here. Ooh, this is a Deus Ex Machina. Let's talk about why you felt like you needed to spring them with an ultra powerful character. Hey, who is your speaker here? Because you're speaking directly to the audience, but I don't know the occasion. Like, is your character talking? Who are they writing for or talking to? Because I need to know. Hey, you broke the fourth wall and you talked about it like a game. Why'd you do that? You get to have these lovely, very in-depth conversations about fiction and cultivate both some of the more difficult to teach stuff like grammar, but also some of the really compelling stuff like story flow and how to create compelling plots and characters. So then the second half, we usually play a live session. So I will usually then take on the role of storyteller. And during the lore session, we're planning what we'll do. Based on what they write, we decide what kind of story they want to explore that day with their characters. And so I, as a teacher, am doing a little bit of prep as I'm helping them edit. When we start the live session, we explore whatever they'd like to chase after. And the goal here is it's the inspiration. We often talk about blank page pain with the kids. I'll say, have you ever started to try to write a story? And you're like, I don't know. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, yeah, because it's tough when you control everything. There's no surprise. There's no excitement. In fact, there's pressure because you got to resolve everything for these characters. And you got to, keep sticking your hand up everybody's puppet butt and make them talk to each other. And that can be complicated, especially for a kid. With live sessions, they get to hear other voices, get inspired by the interactions, and get surprised by the outcomes. We talk a lot about sort of the joy of the roll, because the roll lets you get inspired, right? Oh no, trouble. I did not think it would go that way. What would be cool here? So with my current playtesters in Maine, they've got 30-minute per day sessions of literacy, and they're using those as lore sessions where kids build their characters and also write their stories. Fridays, they have a 2-hour block that they can use for live sessions with the kids. Now, this may not be every week. We're still working on it, although apparently the kids are all clamoring for it. We're 1 week into this, and it's it's been really exciting. I've been sort of super stoked to hear all the stuff that's going on there. The kids are apparently, other teachers were coming by to find out what was happening with the 5th grade, because they were absolutely all just talking about Luna Uni all day long. So the next piece is how to deal with live play, right? You've got 20, 30 kids. We're beginning with fishbowl play. So there's an outside ring of students and an inside ring of students. There are 4 to 5 kids per group and 4 to 5 groups per class. And each of them has their own Google slide deck where they're writing and maintaining their stories. So there's a way for them to all touch base, read each other's stories, and see what's been happening in the plot line. During live play, what we do is one person from every crew is in the middle, and they are the live players. The ones on the outside are taking notes, suggesting ideas, and playing NPCs, and they can tag in. So if somebody from your crew is like, ooh, I got a good idea for this scene, they can go and tap their friend on the shoulder and be like, can I get in there for a second? And they'll swap out and have a moment of live. We're planning to run this for 2 or 3 more live sessions before we split the kids and they're familiar enough with the way a scene is structured that they can do it. And then we'll give them the scene information that they need and have them run their own scenes together. I can talk about scene structure, but I'm trying to cover a lot. So let me know if there are things that you're curious about design-wise, and I'm happy to go over them. Next, character design. So characters are defined by lines. You can also call these tags. Everyone starts with a drive, a downfall, a trait, you can call it a skill or power if you like, a bond, and a quirk. And usually kids will want a piece of gear too. In a science fiction background, you always got to give them one piece of gear, especially if they're all super science nerds. So everybody is getting a gear this time through. The cool piece about using purely descriptive phrases to talk about a character and focusing kids on things like what motivates your character? What do they struggle with? What's something weird or unique about them that people are going to remember? The goal is to cultivate story awareness of characterization. What makes a character compelling in a story? Not what makes you successful at dealing lots of damage or rolling really high, but rather what makes you interesting? What's going to compel me as a reader about your character? I remember I had a kid in my after school program that I'm running right now, and this one's an in-person that I'm also using to playtest Luna Uni. She said, so I could be anything? And I said, yeah. She said, can I be a 3-eyed shape-shifting demon? And I was like, yeah, but that's a what, not a who. And she went, huh? And I said, well, I don't know if they're interesting. Like, they could be really boring. And I said, if they're a 3-eyed shape-shifting demon who hates that everyone's terrified of their natural form, so they always shapeshift into adorable, cuddly animals, but then whenever they get nervous, they shapeshift back into this giant, terrifying looking demon and feel really embarrassed when everyone's horrified. And you could see it. The kid was like, and she immediately started writing that character up. She's like, yep, that's me. I was like, great, do it. But that's the key, is having those conversations. So this also doubles as a literary analysis tool. Actually, my partners used this already this week. You can ask kids to fill out a character sheet for a character in a book they're reading. So in their current class, they're reading Amari and the Night Brothers, and they had a really powerful discussion about Amari, the main character. And the question was, what's her drive? And some kids said, well, she wants to find her brothers. And he said, yeah, the teacher was really good at this. I'm very lucky in my collaborators. Tyler and Tom are amazing. He said, yeah, but that's external. Like, imagine her brothers came back. Would she still have that drive? And I said, well, no. And he said, yeah, so that's more of a goal than it is a drive. A drive is something that exists internally, regardless of the change externally. And they all kind of thought about that. Finally, somebody said, she wants to prove that she's her own person and different from her brothers. And everybody was like, yeah. And they found the quote and they put it into the character sheet. So there's a nice reflective for language learning. This is really effective. They have language learners in their classroom, second language learners. They have a lot of kids who struggle. In fact, few of our stories are actually in other languages, which is really exciting. And they're going to be working with translation as they go on. So that's the second piece. Third piece is self-evaluation to peer celebration. So all stories get read aloud. Everybody cheers for every story. It doesn't matter if it's a single sentence. And then the kid themselves is asked to give themselves a number of story points. And if you can see, there's a little box over here. 1 point is for when you didn't write much. You'll get it next time. 2 points, paragraph. 3 points, basic story, couple pages. 4 points mean your story was pushing it. 5 points is this is one of your best. So we call that the Holy Monkeys Award. So kids will always try to externalize and ask other people first. They never want to rate their own stories. But part of the goal here is to cultivate self-awareness, right? Where are you? How well did you do? How much did you struggle? Was this really hard? Was this really easy? Did you really push? Are you really proud of certain things you did in this story? Get them to be able to analyze their own growth as a writer at a meta level without making it tense or unpleasant. I just included a little note here from this week's class. Again, I'm very lucky in my collaborators. They've intuitively grasped the approach, and we're now working on developing the tools that will help folks who are new to story games do the same thing. He had one of the students read aloud, and everybody clapped like crazy. He asked her, okay, how many points? And she said 2. And the entire class erupted and was like, no, that was a 5. You're ridiculous. How dare you give yourself 2? Because this was an exceptional story. But the goal here was to give them a model who was not some stranger they'd never met, but rather a peer, right? So when they are modeling and when they're especially in mixed ability groups, there's a wonderful upward pull. The kids who struggle see what the kids who are really pushing themselves are doing and get excited, and they start to model that. So he mentioned that as soon as she finished, the other students were all kind of like, all right, let's go. And it changed the expectation without it coming from the teacher. It was peer-to-peer rather than teacher to student. They collaborate on a novella. At the end of the class, they're going to have a full novella that they're going to get to send home to their parents. So challenge points are the way to push for differentiation. So for every student, after you go through a lore session, you get to say, all right, for next time, here are some things you can work on. If you can nail one of these, I'll give you a bonus point. So the challenge point is, if you decide to engage with the challenge, you can get the extra loot, which means more ability tags for you, means more special powers, and also the ability to, save your friends' butts when they need a reroll, which kids always love. So there's a lot you can work with here. I mentioned it earlier. I won't beat the dead horse. So assessment. One of the coolest parts about this is they get a really huge portfolio going and the kids write extra, which that's the part that I don't know. As a teacher, I've always been, that's how you know you're doing it right. When kids are doing it, regardless of whether you're in the room or not. It's not for you. It's for them and it's for their friends. All of these end up with very nicely accessible standards. We have these standards. There are standards attached to these. The Common Core standards are national standards for the US. Some states use them more than others, but they're very nice, broad academic standards that apply. If you read up on them, they're very simple and easy to understand, but also very, very effective. They're definitely the sorts of things you want students doing. These are the areas we're hitting, and we're looking at incorporating some more. Physical copies. So not all classrooms can be digital. I'm going to be leveraging a lot of the work I've done for Stories RPG, releasing print and play games that go with our podcast. So we use coloring book pages because because they're awesome and because I know a guy and his art is amazing. Rob Hebert of Nerdy Paper Games did this particular illustration. It's amazing. This was a superheroic capture the flag scene. So for Luna Uni, once we've gone through the full story arc and I'm working with my collaborators to give them scenes that make sense for their classroom, it's going to be a rough structure because you want the students to have enough freedom to develop their own stories and go off script. But you're going to need some general main scenarios for kids to play through. So I'm going to have a physical PDF of the book that anyone can play, families can play at home, but also a digital online slide tool that folks can use in the classroom if they have digital access. And then finally, the third thing will be a teacher's guide. So next steps, we're going to incorporate some math and science. I have a pre-algebraic resolution mechanic that I really like that we're going to be play testing. My science, so I have an ecology background, a little bit of biology as well. So we're probably going to incorporate some niches and have kids developing other worlds that they can visit as their researchers. And they'll have to, of course, include things like which niche each creature fills, how they're connected in a food web. My collaborator also is really into physics. So we're talking a little bit about designing gravity for different worlds and how it'll shape the experience that kids have when they're there. We're also talking about doing research papers on ancient Earth fauna. They might take a time travel trip as loony work. So in other words, this is their researchers producing research papers for their classes on ancient Earth critters. Sorry, my dog very badly wants to come in the room, and I'm going to let her in because she keeps yelping at me. Everyone's been so kind and quiet. I hope it's not that you've all fallen asleep. Feel free to yell at me or throw things at the screen if you like. So yeah, I'm at the end. I have a bunch of links here. I'll definitely link the presentation for you. I have the Kickstarter. There's the first talk that I gave that goes a little bit more into the design I use in Stories RPG. There's storiesrpg.com that has the podcast and the play at home games. There's luckalegends.com, which is where I run my classes. There's a Discord we've got for teachers. You're welcome if you want to chat with some of us in the English speaking world. Feel free to come through. We've got folks from all over. And there's a lovely game jam that I'll tell you the secret. Every month, I just extend the deadline another month. So it's effectively a living library of educational games submitted by folks all over itch. And we've got so many cool things in there. Like I can't even keep up. I keep seeing new things and being like, oh, I want to see that. And then I gets lost because there's another 5 games submitted. But it's a lovely library. And if you're an educator or working with students in any capacity, it's a great place to find resources. And yeah, thank you. And that is all I have to say.
Oh, thank you very much. Do you copy the links in the documentation?
Yeah, let me drop. Hold on.
Not necessary now, but today or tomorrow.
Oh no, it's easy. Here you go.
Thank you.
I will go. There's the. Oh yeah, my pleasure. There's the presentation. And that has all the links. Probably the easiest thing for the links is this thing. There you go. The bio link. I did this little, it's one of those little 1-page things that says, here's all the stuff I do. If you want to look at it, go look at it. Here you go. So there's the bio link in the notes as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
I have a formal question.
Please.
My brain says you use the word story points and the word challenge points. Are those the same?
Yeah. Okay. A challenge point is just, it allows you to get one more than the cap. So if you were going to normally get 3 story points for what you got, if you also decided that you were going to write 5 compound complex sentences because you're terrible at those, then, and you nailed it, then yeah, you got 4, which is actually a big difference. Generally, you can buy a new line for 3 story points. and it costs 5 story points for a special. And a special allows you to once per game do something epic that really changes the flow of the story. And so, you know, kids love buying specials. They love and they also get, you know, running into NPCs. That's my favorite thing. They'll run into NPCs and they'll fall in love and they'll be like, I want to bond with that guy. And you're like, oh, okay. You know, and they'll be like, I'm going to go right so I can save up and get my bond. And I'm like, no, that's totally legit. So it's cool how invested they get in building the network, and that they are writing for the purpose of building more story, not for any kind of ridiculous, arbitrary external reward, but an internal one. Anyone else have questions? Please, I'd love to chat.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I wanted to say that was really good. That is fascinating and inspiring. And one of the things I really, really like about it is how that, you know, that what you're doing, you're not just teaching, you know, the mechanics of writing, you are teaching storytelling. And that's such a hard thing to do. And that's something I really admire. And like, so yeah, I'm very excited hearing all about all of this, all of the work that you're doing. A question that I have is really like, how do you deal with different levels of ability within a class? Like,
that's like my favorite question.
Yeah.
I got really excited. So in my online classes, I have mixed age groups. Very often I'll have a kid who's 7 working with a kid who's 13. And to me, it's revealed something about our educational system. Once again, we design not for kids, right? We're not designing for students. We're designing for our ease. Kids love being in mixed level groups. There's this wonderful effect with different aged kids. It's slightly different with same aged kids, but with different aged kids, you get this lovely effect where, you know, the 7-year-old sees what the 13-year-old is doing. And I could show the 7-year-old a story and the 7-year-old be like, okay, great. Nice story. But you see the 13-year-old, this is what the 13-year-old wrote, and they read it, and the 7-year-old goes. And immediately they start, they're like, I want to write a story like that. And they push themselves. They'll start experimenting with dialogue and descriptive prose. They'll try to write backstories that they never would have thought of before. Most 7-year-olds are dealing with like, okay, I go to store. I do this thing. I do next thing. By the same token, the 13-year-old very often takes on this role as mentor and gets really into, they'll be like, yes, let me show you how it's done, kid. And they'll kind of talk about stories. I have some of my older students who've been with me now for a bit. They've gotten very meta about their ability to talk about themselves as writers. So, you know, I was in a class, yesterday with a student I've had for a while. And he said, you know, we were talking about like what theme we wanted for this game. And he said, you know, I feel like when I started, I went through this dark phase, and then I went through my faceless hero phase. I really made a lot of boring characters. And then I went full comedy. And now I kind of want to do something a little bit balanced. And I was just like, but my play testers, they asked me the same question. They said, should we level them? And they have reading levels in their classes. They said, should we put them in same reading level, same writing level classes? And I said, my suggestion would be to split it. And that's in fact what they did. And they said, even within the first week, they were like, oh my God, it's amazing. You know, these kids who normally write a couple sentences are now pounding out half a page, which for them is, we've never seen them write this much. And it's precisely because they want to stay with their peers, and they want to be able to be celebrated when they read. So mixed level groups, I think, are actually one of the biggest ignored secrets to why, you know, having a bunch of different kids of different sizes and backgrounds is great. The challenge points allow you also to specifically target and differentiate what each kid works on. So kid at the top of the room, yeah, we can have a deep conversation about why you feel the need for Deus Ex Machina and why you don't feel comfortable when your characters struggle with adversity and what would be an interesting way to explore this that wouldn't make you uncomfortable as an author. That can be where the challenge points lie for the top of the room. The kid who's struggling at the bottom, they still get that big boost, even for doing something as simple as, hey, you know what? Let's work on paragraph breaks. Because you text wall and you never seem to know when to break. Next time, give me paragraphs. Give me paragraphs. Think about where the story shifts. And all that reading aloud really helps them with that. It cultivates their ear. It cultivates the way they think about story. And so does the live session, because it's focused on what would be interesting to have happen next, rather than, you know, did I kill it?
Fantastic. Thank you very much. That's a fantastic explanation. Thank you.
Oh yeah, no problem. You feel free to interrupt, by the way. I get excited if you can't tell. I actually like what I do quite a bit. So when people are like, what do you do? I'm like, can I tell you? And if my partner isn't in the room to sink her claws into my leg, I will tell you. So you're perfectly welcome to stop me if I go too hard. Thank you.
Oh yeah, no, you weren't going too hard at all. That was brilliant.
Thank you.
I have another small question. Terry Pratchett writes about write-only text that is only written but never read.
Yeah.
And you talked about that if all is well, students start to produce massive amounts of text.
Yep.
So I want to know, how much write-only text is there? For example, do they write more than can be written, can be read by you or by the other students? And is it a problem at all if that happens?
No, it's actually the reverse. That's how you know it's working. So at first, when students begin, they'll write a backstory that's a page long. There's always one or two, the story nerds who never have had a chance. If you're athletic, that's lovely. Society is built to make you feel proud of your athleticism and get you lots of pure attention for it. Story nerds, there's very few opportunities in the middle of school for story nerds to be like, I wrote a thing. And like, when they have their first moment, and they're never confident. They're always like, I wrote this little thing. And then when it gets read aloud, everybody else is like, what? You wrote that? And you can see kids, and that's when they start getting nerdy about reading each other's stuff in between classes. That's one of the reasons the digital tools are so powerful. And this works well, physical, but the thing that it doesn't do if you take away the digital aspect is there's not a free space for kids. So the lovely thing about the slide deck is it turns into this play space where kids collaborate, where they overwrite, where they create joke slides with like weird characters they love. And they're like, and they'll create little notes like, let's stick this guy in next round, or you should write about this. And that's when they start writing more than can be read. And so, I have slide decks with, eventually we have to branch off. We'll often do chapters. So the slide deck will get so big. I've had 200 slides in a deck. And they'll be like, oh, okay, chapter 3, because really we did chapter 1 and 2, and we'll build a new slide deck. But I'll always ask when we get to that rate, I'll say, what do you want to read from what you wrote this week? Because you went so hard. There's no way we can read all of it. And that lets the author decide like, okay, my favorite scene was this. And it's another level of meta analysis and also the opportunity to like get nerdy about what you share. And then kids always go and read the rest of it. They're like, no, but I like the scene where blah, blah, blah happens. And I'll be like, we only have this much time. The author gets to pick. And they're like, well, can I give up my reading so we can read their thing on this? I'm like, no, we need to hear from everyone. But that's when it's not about you, which is exactly what you want in a classroom. You want kids passionately learning because they love it. Yeah, sorry, I keep cleaning these, but they keep smudging. So I don't know if that answered. Did that answer your question? And yay for a Terry Pratchett holler. I have a quote of his that if I got tattoos, I think I'd probably get it tattooed somewhere. It's about violence. And it's from his Introduction to the Carpet People, which was his first book. And he said, this is a book written by two people, the person I was when I was 18 and the person I am now at 43. And he said, at that time, I thought that stories were about kings and wars and winning. And now I think it's about doing without kings and avoiding wars. And as a storyteller, I'm very compelled by nonviolent fiction, and all of my games are nonviolent by nature. And I love that quote. Would anyone else like to ask anything, say anything, poke me? I'm free. My time is yours.
I really don't have a question because I'm already kind of lost in all the links you shared with us.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Going down a rabbit hole right now, but I'm really excited after your talk. It's also so great to see how much, I don't know, you're like bursting with energy, and I feel like, okay, I am so excited to learn more about this now. It's so great. Thank you.
No, absolutely. I talked more about the design of the game in the previous talk that I gave. You're welcome to look there. Stories RPG, you can get the whole toolkit for $4, I think. And it's got like, the base game is 2 pages, very simple. And the second thing is like how to run a scene and structure a scene. And it'll even talk about how, ultimately you move from running scenes with kids to helping them design their own scenes and run their own scenes. Because the breakdown is very simple. It's in basically 4 chunks. There's a hook, which is a picture and a read aloud. Then there's a list of questions that are called explore the scene. Things your characters might want to know or want to find out, and things the teller might describe or play up. Then there's make a move, which is here's some stuff you might want to do that's risky, that could have interesting effects in this scene. And the last section is triumphs and troubles, which are here are some results from your role that might be cool for the story. And it goes from, scene development all the way up to, I have a mechanic called drama clocks, which are designed to make, it basically says you only have this many moves to get this many triumphs or something dramatic happens. And we always clarify, doesn't mean anybody's going to die. It just means there will be, the story will change in a difficult, challenging, interesting, dramatic way. I always know I'm doing it right when some kid's like, let's blow this drama clock. I want to see what happens if the dragon eats the world. And the kids are like, yeah. And like, I'm like, okay, they're in it for the story now. But yeah, that's probably the easiest place to start is the Stories RPG toolkit, because it has all the bits and bobs. And then the Stories RPG pod is free, so you can listen to it anytime. And that sort of introduces the mechanics. And you can also find all the games that go along with it. So I had a Kickstarter for Starsworn, which you can get physically, but you can also get it digitally as a PDF. And it's 120 pages. I have a copy around here. Hold on. Yeah, I got very excited. This is my first book that we ever made. And oh my gosh, holding it in my hands the first time was so exciting, even though I'm a big believer in digital stuff. So this is the book. And we've got copies that went out to libraries and stuff, but it's got these 2-page spreads for scenes. And it's a choose your own adventure coloring book that teaches you to role play as you go. And it introduces the rules sort of as you go. It introduces more and more complex rules until you get to, you get your special powers. Eventually you find out about drama clocks and taking notes. So it's sort of slow release, if you will. And then, Luna Uni is coming up in March. I'm going to be at South by Southwest presenting, which is a big education conference in Austin. And that's when it goes live. And then I'm going to be working all through the summer to finish all the bits and bobs and hopefully have it in educators' hands before fall classes start. I'm looking for end of July, beginning of July, if I can do it. I don't know if I'm tough enough. I feel like I'm doing so many things at once, but if I'm tough enough, I'll finish beginning of July so everybody can eyeball it and decide which tools they want to play around with in the coming year.
Have you already successfully and sufficiently plugged your Discord server?
I have not. Would you like me to? I have too many links. I feel like you said it. I thank you, Momo. It's funny. My wife's name is actually She goes by the nickname Momo, which is Peach in Japanese because she's Japanese. So I saw your name and I was like, oh, hello. But yeah, I have, you pointed it out. I have far too many links, which.
So, the question that I would ask if I wouldn't tell you to plug your Discord server is, where can people reach you once they recovered from the storm of great presentation and information? And in the future days, have questions or ideas or want to participate, and you have a Discord server where you are approachable. If people can speak English and write English, they can get to you and other people's like-minded people there. And of course, you are also reachable on the eduRPG server because from time to time you are here as well.
So yeah, I'm all over the place. That bio link, I'll put it back up again, is probably the easiest place to find all the ways to get in touch with me. But there's the Discord server. It's also linked. I don't know if you guys saw. If y'all saw. Let me go one slide back on the, So I linked the presentation and I put it in the notes. This really is sort of like, if you want to get nerdy and chase all the links, here they all are. So there's the classroom Kickstarter for Luna Uni. There's storiesrpg.com where you can listen to the podcast and find all the downloadable games. There's the first talk that I gave for the Waldritter. There's luckoflegends.com, which is where I do my teaching. There's the Jam that has a bunch of work from all sorts of wonderful teachers who are doing nerdy things with story games in classrooms. There's my itch page where you can find all the modular tools, and there's the Discord. So they're all there. The net is so strange, you think something like a net or a web, it sounds connected, and instead it ends up fracturing you into 1,000 little pieces, right? So there are all my fractured places I exist online. But I will, it's posted in the notes already. Do you think I should post all of those separate links in the notes too? Or, because I feel like maybe I'm asking too much if you have to go find them at the bottom.
Enough.
Okay. Any other questions about anything at all?
The links link to each other. So luckoflegends.com and the Discord server are probably the best sources to get to the other places as well.
This is true.
So a question I have is about, because you're asking the students to read aloud in front of each other. Do you have any issues with confidence and students not feeling confident presenting to each other, and your camera seems to have frozen? That might just be on my end. No, you're okay. You're moving again. And I guess, are there things built into the structure of the RPG or the lessons to account for that?
I think I'm frozen because you're frozen. I'll wait for a moment. Can you hear me though?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Did
then
you hear my question.
Yes, I did.
Okay. Cool.
I totally. Yeah. So one thing that I'm very big into is student agency. I think one of the mistakes teachers often make is forcing kids to decide to do a thing before they're comfortable. So one thing that I always do with my students who are nervous, they can always have somebody else read for them. But if they really struggle with reading aloud, you can offer them a challenge point. And that's when you have, some shy kids will have like, oh, I'm going to get my friend to read, or, Mr. Lowe, will you read? And I'll put on a, ridiculous voice and do the reading. But if you offer them the challenge point, eventually they'll come some point. And this is the subtle stuff that I'm working on how to communicate to non-story nerds. If you're not a story game nerd, there are some things about pacing and how to use mechanics to ratchet tension up and then also ease tension and allow everybody to have relaxing fun. And one of the tricks I like to use is, I'll get them to bankrupt their story points with a couple of really tough scenes. And then everybody will be real hungry for story points. And, it'll come time for a lore session. And that shy kid will be like, I don't want to read. And their friends will be like, dude, if you read this time, you'll get an extra story point. Do it for the story point. And, they'll be like, okay, I'll do it. And they'll do it for their friends. They won't do it for you, but they'll do it for their friends. And then when they get the cheers, when they finish and they get the challenge point, all of a sudden it helps them, when they choose to go over that mountain themselves and decide, yeah, okay, I'm ready to do this now. It's worth it for me. And gosh, that wasn't so bad. You know, like I could do that again, maybe. So that's the trick I use.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, it's what works. I'm always trying to figure out what works, and I'm always changing things up based on what kids are showing me, because they know better than we do. And I think that's half the problem is most adults don't listen to kids. It makes us bad at a lot of things involving them. So yeah.
So maybe if I'm maybe so bold, the story points. Once in a while, people have mastered a skill they haven't mastered yet. So the challenge point system is dynamic because you don't get a challenge point for something that isn't a challenge. So how do people deal with not getting the rewards that they are used to?
Oh,
do
we talk about
they
it.
celebrate it? Do they feel this as a success that they don't longer get challenge points?
Well, so it's interesting. It depends on the group and it depends on the mood, right? And the kids. And it really is a teacher move. This is one of the rare moments where you get to, you know, this is a moment you can kind of do a little pushing because, you know, a kid will be like, well, so I should get 5 for that. And you know, because they wrote 2 pages. And I was like, wait a minute. How many times have you written 2 pages in the last month? And they'll be like, I don't know, like a couple times. And some kid will be like, dude, every one of your stories is 2 pages now. And they'll be like, yeah, but when I started, I was only writing like 2 sentences. And I'll be like, congratulations. You now are good enough that 5 points is not the appropriate award for 2 pages. You have more. You can go hard now. And the other kids will be like, that's right. You know, like the kid will usually do the combination of like, a little bit of pride, a little bit like, but you can see they're also kind of like, and yeah, I know I am better than that now. And then you'll also have kids who, oh, it's very cute. I had a kid yesterday who, she's one of my absolute like hardcore story nerds. She usually writes about 10 pages a week. This is a weekly class. And I mean, gosh, she's only 11, but she writes 10 pages a week and they're brilliant. And the other kids are all like, read Ellie's story. Like that's always, everybody's excited for Ellie's stuff. And she wrote, you know, 2 pages last week. And we came to story points and she was like 2. And the other kids were like, heck no, like you got to give yourself at least 3. You got to get 3 for two pages. And I was like, but guys, Ellie's bar is pretty high. And they all were like, yeah, no, that's true. And they were like, but she still deserves it. Give her the extra point. I was like, okay, well, of course, I always listen to what y'all say. Ellie, would you like the extra point? And Ellie was like, yes. So we gave her the extra point. But it was lovely because she definitely has an awareness of where her bar is. And that's one of the key elements for me as an educator. I think one of the mistakes we make, and there are countless when we work with kids, is we very often we do this terrible thing where they rely on us. You know, what grade did I get? And it's amazing the first time you ask kids, like, what do you think you should get for story points? They're absolutely terrified. They're like, well, but I'm not supposed to say. And I'm like, why are you not supposed to say? And it takes them a little practice to get good at being like, I think based on what I've done in the past and how hard things are for me and how much I pushed, this is where I am. But that is such a crucial skill for adulthood. We talk so much about wishing to build, you know, independent confidence in our learners. And then we do so much to take independence and agency and voice away from them and make them dependent on external forces. I will give you your grade, and then you will know your worth. That's terrible. Like, who needs that? Whereas if you tell a kid and you coach kids on, here's how to think through this, right? Here's what you might want to think about when you're thinking about your own work. They very quickly adapt and fall in love with the idea of like, oh yeah, I can tell you about myself as a writer. I can tell you what I'm good at and what I'm working on. I can tell you where I was a month ago. I can tell you where I would like to be. I got some goals. That's what we want, right? That's how you coach an independent learner.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Time is up and gone. I don't know. We going back to the plenum in the Akan Bibliothek. Yeah, thank you very much for all of you, and yeah, see you there.
Feel free to reach out, everyone. I'd love to chat about any of this. Anything you'd like to know. I love to chat about this stuff. I'm excited to share. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
And I think we need to stop the recording, right?
Oh,
yeah.
yes.